Hey everyone, good day. Thanks again for joining us for another webinar, this time our second deep dive into Ethiopia. I'm joined again this week by Ashenafi Sileshi, one of our excellent Travel Ethiopia guides, coming to us live from Addis Ababa, better known as Ashu. So Ashu, welcome. Can you just say hi? Last week we didn't have your video, so I thought this week we try to show your face. So say hello to everyone on the webinar. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you very much, Tad. Hello, everyone. I'm Ashu from Ethiopia.
And how's the rain today? It is rainy season, so still raining in Addis?
Yeah, almost 24 hours.
Oh my goodness.
But it's not like a heavy rain. By the way, it's like, it's very good for the soil and for everything. And we are planting seedlings and trees. There is still a big campaign in the country. So it's very, very, welcoming rain.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for staying up late on your side. I am Tad Bradley from the Cassini Collection. I'm in Seattle, another place that is famous for its rain. Although today it's a beautiful sunny summer day here. I'm also joined by Gretchen Healy, my colleague based in Denver, and Gretchen's going to do most of the presenting today. She's hosted the last two fam trips that we've done to Ethiopia over the last several years, and has spent a lot of time in the Simien Mountains. As someone from the high country of Colorado, I think she just really belongs in the Simiens, and as a hiker and a trekker, the Simiens definitely call to her, as they did to me when I visited several years ago now with Ashu on my first trip to Ethiopia. But given her recent experience, she's going to take us through this presentation. We'll do a Q&A at the end. Feel free to put in your questions to the Q&A field as you have them, and we'll likely cover those at the end. We may grab them during the presentation as well if we see them. And yeah, thanks for joining us. This is, for me, and as I said, for Gretchen, I think probably the most spectacular part of Ethiopia, and that says a lot because Ethiopia has a lot of spectacular country. Haralta might be there neck and neck with the Simiens. And as I say this, Lalibela and the mountains around Lalibela are also gorgeous. The Bali mountains are gorgeous. So anyway, the whole country is beautiful, but the Simiens are just spectacularly beautiful. The Grand Canyon of Africa, said by some. And then Gondar is a fascinating destination as well. The seat of the empire, kings and queens of Ethiopia and emperors over the years. So also termed the Camelot of Ethiopia, or the Camelot of Africa. So lots of intrigue, lots of mystery and mysticism in these two beautiful places. So Gretchen, I'm going to hand it over to you to take us on this virtual tour. And Ashu will also chime in with his thoughts as we go along. I'm going to turn off my video. Ashu, probably good for you as well, just to save our bandwidth, and then we can turn them back on later as needed. Gretchen is being shy, and or she doesn't have a good internet connection, depending on what you believe. But Gretchen, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Tad. And thank you everyone for being here today. I think I'd start by saying that Ethiopia it defies expectations. It's a place I visited over and over again, and I remember how blown away I was the first time. You can see me perched on the edge of a cliff there over the Simien Mountains, and seasonally it's different. I have a habit of going back into going to visit in September, which is one of the most glorious months there are. But let's start with Gondar first. It's a little over 700 kilometers north of Addis, and depending on your routing, you may either fly into Bahir Dar and see the monasteries out on Lake Tana, or you might fly directly into Gondar. But what I would say is that the drive between Bahir Dar and Gondar is quite beautiful. You get to see pastoral scenes, some gorgeous scenery. You get to see more of Lake Tana, and then there's a stop en route. You could stop in Warota for a coffee and then go to visit the Arwa Amba village, which is an egalitarian community that has a weaving cooperative. And it's a pretty unique community with a real focus on education, which differs from, not that the rest of Ethiopia doesn't value education, but there's such a religious focus throughout the country that this is a little bit different. the weaving is shared between men and women, and you know, you can buy gorgeous textiles and woven products there, hand woven products, and it's kind of a special visit. Ashu, do you want to add anything to that? Did I kind of cover it?
Well, I mean, you know, you have said, you know, well, I mean, you know, nothing. I think maybe, you know, we can proceed onto the next.
Okay. So again, you can drive or you can fly directly from Addis. There's also a flight from Lalibela, depending on which direction you're doing the circuits. It's also just a 3 to 4 hour scenic drive to the Simien Mountains National Park from Gondar. So if you're going to the Simiens, this is the natural direction to go. Gondar, as Tad mentioned, is AKA the Camelot of Africa, and it's aptly named. It's riddled with castles almost. It was once the royal capital of the Ethiopian Empire. And maybe, Ashu, you can take us through a little history. It was founded in 1636.
Yeah, 1636 became a capital city.
So it was founded by Emperor Fasilides. Did I get it?
Yeah.
Okay. The castles and churches are the real attraction here. The surrounding countryside is absolutely beautiful. It's kind of in the foothills to the Simien Mountains. And the attraction really are these ancient structures. So if you want to move on, Tad, to the next. Oh, I forgot. The royal enclosure is a UNESCO World Heritage Site as well. So these are just some of the scenes. It's hard to impress upon you the grandeur of these structures. And for me, the first time I saw them, how very unexpected they were. But it shows how little, I think, around the world that people truly know about Ethiopia. So the royal enclosure is about a half-day visit. And a Travel Ethiopia guide will take you through the various castles. And maybe you can kind of, Ashu, touch on a few of the structures and their significance.
Yeah, I mean, when you see these structures, it's not just Ethiopian. It's really, you know, a good blend of different civilization. Especially, you can see, you know, the big one with the dome tower, which is influenced by Portuguese architecture, and then we have got the Moorish or Arab influence, and of course, there are also certain interesting markers left by the Ethiopian Jewish community inside. So it's a blend of different civilization, and I think that makes it unique to be seen in Africa.
Definitely, and it's really a special visit.
Yeah.
Another of the really important things to see in Gondar is Fasilides Bath. This is, the water is generally empty, I believe, Ashu, through most of the year, but it is filled during Timkat, the Ethiopian Epiphany celebration. Ooh, yeah.
Yes.
Which is in January, I believe.
Yeah.
And visitors are allowed through special arrangements, I believe, to visit cultural celebrations. As we mentioned last week, I've had the very special opportunity to see mescal in a couple of locations in Ethiopia, and then Timkat again is a vibrant, beautiful, colorful, incredible ceremony to watch. And this was thought to be the grand swimming pool of the emperor. It's now used for baptisms. It symbolizes the holy waters of the River Jordan in Israel, where Jesus Christ was baptized. And again, Timkat in January, hundreds of people bathe in these waters as part of their christening rituals. This is the absolutely stunning Debri Birhan Sileshi Church, which is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It was built in the late 18th century by Iyasu I, the grandson of the emperor. And its walls and ceilings have some pretty incredible paintings, and it's scenes of biblical lore and medieval history. And it may be the most famous ecclesiastical art in Ethiopia. The preservation of it is absolutely incredible.
Sorry, Gretchen, you just said it may be the most famous ecclesiastical art in Ethiopia, and I just want to jump in and say that says a lot, because there are, I mean, the monastery, the island monasteries in Lake Tana are spectacular as well. Obviously, Lalibela. So that's a big statement, just so people realize how extraordinarily beautiful this particular church is in a country of extraordinarily beautiful art within churches.
That's a great point, Tad, because as you travel through the historic North, you are absolutely spoiled with the incredible artwork and the preserved churches and monasteries and sites. It is breathtaking, and this one particularly so. The walls have many painted scenes that include the life of Christ, as well as you can see the ceiling, you can see the cherub faces. I believe there's 80 of them painted on the ceiling.
Angels,
and it's just sorry?
These are the angels, archangels here.
And it's a very, very special place to visit. And it's set inside a sort of walled compound that's quite peaceful. And it's an incredible site. And I believe, Ashu, please correct me if I'm wrong, that most of the Gondar churches were destroyed in 1888. And
yes, that, absolutely.
Okay. And so Deborah Biran was the sole survivor. And I believe the legend has it, or the history has it, that it was saved by a swarm of bees. Is that correct?
Yeah, swarm of bees with the help of the Archangel Michael.
So it is a particularly holy site.
Yeah, I mean, just to add a point here, by the way, on the paintings, it's really, this style of painting is typical to Gondar. Because of this, now in Ethiopian traditional art, this style of painting even is named after the town and called Gondarin style. So you can see, how important it is.
So again, I have a penchant for traveling in September. You can see these are the mescal daisies. The country is covered in them, and it just makes everything, which is already wonderful, extra beautiful as you travel through.
Just Gretchen or Ashu, maybe chime in quickly on mescal and what the significance is of that particular time of year and the festival.
Ashu, I'll defer to you.
Okay, thank you. Mescal is really, it's one of the most colorful and open air festival of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. It's an annual celebration that falls on the 26th, and 27th of September. Basically, the actual festival is on 26th, but in certain area, they do celebrate it on the 27th. It commemorates the finding of the true cross upon which Jesus was crucified by Queen Helena, the mother of Emperor Constantine. And it is an intangible world heritage. It's already described by UNESCO.
Thanks, Ashu. Yeah, Gretchen, I know you've experienced it on 2 occasions. So not only do you have these incredible natural beauty that time of year because of the blooming mescal daisies, but then you do have those really fascinating cultural and religious ceremonies well, Addis, I think, has the biggest one and is kind of the focal point, but you also were able to luckily experience one in Debark, which is the gateway to the Simien Mountains en route from Gondar to the Simiens when you were there last year, right?
Yes, and I would say, they were incredibly different experiences, though both had the same sort of ceremony and solemnity and celebration. The costumes and the music and the bonfire and just being allowed to witness that and be a part of it in a very welcoming way was extraordinary. And having experienced it in both settings, also incredibly special.
Yeah, very cool. All right, so some properties here in Gondar.
So Mayleko Lodge is just across the road from the airport, and I say that with no complaints about air noise because that's not really an issue. It's actually quite convenient in terms of if you're catching an early flight out or something like that. It's also a really beautiful property. The gardens are lovely and well kept, and there's, you know, green grass and places to walk around a bit. The rooms are airy and comfortable. There's a restaurant on site which serves, you know, very reliable Ethiopian and Italian food. They also have a pool, which is nice. So it's a great location. And then the Gondar Hills Resort was just at a soft opening when I was there, and it is stunning. The views are absolutely incredible. It has an infinity pool and a spa and like a full service restaurant, indoor, outdoor dining. Like I said, you can see it, but this doesn't really do the views justice. The rooms are quite pretty. Again, I don't even think this photo does it justice, and the bathrooms are quite luxurious. So this would absolutely be the top property in Gondar at this point. So next, we will move on to the Simiens. As Tad said, sort of probably between this and Bali National Park, my favorite places in Ethiopia because I'm kind of a mountain girl. So as I mentioned earlier, it's about a 3-hour scenic drive from Gondar. It is, I wouldn't want to get there any other way because the scenery is absolutely stunning. There are, you know, viewpoints along the way. You get to, if you're there, you know, in September, you get to see the mescal daisies, you get to see scenes of rural life. It just, when you're on a flying circuit, I think having a couple of places that you do a bit of driving is really important. It gives you a much better feel for where you are rather than flying from place to place. That said, this is how you get to the Simiens regardless. There is an optional stop to visit the Beta Israel village en route, which is a small village that's home to some of the few remaining descendants of Ethiopian Jews. I have not had the chance to do that. Ashu, I don't know if there's any specific you would like to, anything specific you'd like to touch on for that?
Well, I mean, you know, nowadays there is no many option, I mean, to do a sightseeing tour of that village because the synagogue is there, but it's, you know, a closed synagogue. And it's a bit hustling, you know, the kids are selling all the stuff. So it's not a bit comfortable for really, you know, tourists to stop and, you know, just do this a city tour of the village. But usually what we do is we do stop by the road and let's give clients, you know, an opportunity like 5 to 10 minutes to experience, you know, some of the traditional paintings of the Ethiopian Jewish community and some of their artistic works, because they are really, you know, very, very clever artisans who do make jewelries and, you know, household utensils. Okay.
You mentioned the children sort of being omnipresent and asking for things. I would point out that that's not an issue at Arwa Amba in any way, shape, or form. So that's another thing that makes visiting that village between Bahir Dar and Gondar an even more attractive prospect.
Absolutely.
So Simien Mountains was named a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1978. It was actually one of the very first national parks that UNESCO designated a World Heritage Site. Pardon me, it is home to a lot of different peaks that are over the 4,000 meter mark, and among them the highest mountain in Ethiopia and one of the highest in Africa, which is Rosh Dashen. I sadly have not been up there. That's on my list of things to do yet.
It's an Ethiopian 14er, Gretchen.
Yep, exactly, which kind of, you know, it's going to stay on my list until I eventually get up there. Anyway, it is an incredibly important sanctuary for endemic wildlife, most notably the gelada monkeys, the walia ibex, and at least theoretically, the Ethiopian wolf still has a population there, although guests are not likely to see them. And by not likely, I mean almost a 0 chance.
Yeah, the better chance to see Ethiopian wolves is in the Bali Mountains in the south of the country, which you've been very lucky to have visited twice. I'm only slightly jealous. But that is and we'll do a future webinar on the Bali Mountains at some point. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, as you say, Gretchen, unlikely to see them in the Simien, sadly. But if you do have guests that do want to see them, the Bali Mountains are probably the best, if not the only place really to see them these days. As Ashu said in our last webinar, the Ethiopian wolf is the most endangered canid in the world and one of the most threatened predators actually on the continent of Africa, sadly.
Although there is much work being done in Bali Mountains to try to protect them.
Good point. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
One other quick note is on that drive between Gondar and the Simiens, you will stop in Debark, which, as Tad mentioned, is the gateway to the national park. And you stop to do your permitting and to pick up your local scout who will be with you during the day throughout your experiences in the park. So it's not a long stop, maybe half an hour, but everyone needs to sign in, and then you continue onward to your lodge. As you can see, the views are nothing short of gobsmacking in this park. And all I can say is keep an eye on yourself that you don't walk off a cliff when you're gazing at something, because it is one of the most beautiful places I've seen in my life. The terrain, largely when you're walking along, is not terribly challenging, although it can, if it's rained, it can be slippery underfoot, that sort of thing. I bring trekking poles when I go. I also use them at home, so it's just something that's second nature to me. If you had a guest that was maybe not 100% stable, I would absolutely suggest that. We can also get poles, rent poles in Debark if your guests should need them. So that's just something to consider. Seasonally, the park can look very, very different. In September, it's very green. In December, January, as things dry out, it changes entirely and can be quite dry. That said, it's beautiful no matter when.
I think one other point just to make, Gretchen, in terms of preparation is you're going to be over 10,000 feet pretty much your entire time that you're there. And I know when I was there, one of our guests did have a little bit of issues with the altitude, and that's not anything to do with fitness. It's frankly just mostly genetics, and also you can really help yourself by keeping well hydrated in particular, and also keeping eating as well. So one of the things for your guests to keep in mind is to make sure they are drinking lots of water, maybe even bringing their own snacks that they like to eat while hiking. And Gondar, I believe, is, goodness, Gretchen, do you know, over 8,000 feet? So it does serve as a little bit of acclimatization, as does Addis Ababa for that matter, because it's up over 7,000 feet. So it is kind of smart to allow your guests several days, whether it's in Addis or Gondar, or if they're coming via Lalibela or Axum, kind of going that direction of acclimatization before, they get to the Simiens to do any serious hiking. To go, to fly into Addis and then immediately fly to Gondar and go to the Simien Mountains would probably not be recommended, just because of that necessary acclimatization given the altitude.
That's a great point, Ted. So one of the main reasons that people come to visit the Simiens is, of course, the wildlife. And it's hard to describe almost the experience of spending time with the gelato monkeys. You may have also heard them called gelato baboons, but the science has been done, and they are, in fact, a monkey species. You can find these animals in groups of several hundred, and I don't know that it's nature is never 100% guaranteed, but I've never gone out to trek with gelatos and not seen them. But what makes it so extraordinary is that they are entirely indifferent to human presence. They allow you to walk amongst them, to photograph at a reasonable distance, of course, but close-up photography is really easy. You get to see their natural behavior. They feed on grasses, and they just move about doing their thing, ignoring you utterly. And Tad, you described your experience as well. It's probably my favorite wildlife experience in Africa.
Yeah, I would agree. We're all in this business, especially those of us that get to travel to Africa in particular, so lucky to have these kind of extraordinary wildlife experiences. You know, whether it's going and trekking for gorillas or chimps, or just going on game drives and walking safaris and seeing, you know, the big five. And I have to agree with you. The hour or two that I spent with the geladas on my last trip is, and that's actually a picture of Ashu on that trip on your screen there, was one of probably my top three. If I, you know, I hate to say this is the number one because there's been so many good ones, but it's certainly right up there, maybe the best. Yeah, because like you say, they don't care that you're there. I mean, you're literally just, you're like part of the troop in that they ignore you completely. I guess you're more like an invisible part of the troop, because you just sit there and they had to continue to do their thing, whether it's mating or eating or fighting or wrestling or playing or whatever. And they just kind of go along, you know, the open fields there and do their thing, and don't pay you any mind. And, you know, Ashu is 2 feet away from them. You were in the previous picture 2 feet away from them. So it's a pretty extraordinary wildlife experience. One that I have to say, I was not expecting it to be so incredible. It's definitely, you know, one of those undersell, over deliver sort of experiences. And they are just the most amazing looking, you know, we've all, you've heard this. And if you haven't, well, here you go. It kind of looks like David Lee Roth, you know, 80s hairband in a monkey form with these big bouffant hairdos, and then that really interesting red crescent chest. It's just really spectacular wildlife experience. Definitely up there, top 1 or 2 for sure.
I think I would also add, Tad, that the guides do an incredible job of coordinating visitors through, so that at least all of the times I've done it, and I assume it was the same for you and Ashu, correct me if this is wrong, it's generally just your party that's with the geladas. And then when you move on, I assume somebody else comes in, but we've always had the experience completely to ourselves, which, you know, in a ever crowded world is also, it really adds to how special it is.
Yeah, it does feel so exclusive. Ashu, what's the secret? How do you keep everybody feeling that feeling of it's just you and your group and the geladas, and that's it? Ashu, you there? Did we lose you? Oh, I think we lost Ashu. Must be power cut and or internet cut thanks to the rains. So this picture too, Gretchen, just to touch on it quickly, encapsulates for me what is so astounding about the simians, because you've got these incredibly bizarre, unique, cool primates here that you're surrounded by, and then the backdrop is the Grand Canyon looking, you know, landscapes of the simians. So you can't stop taking pictures in the simians from I mean, obviously with the geladas, your camera or your phone is just constantly going because it's so incredible. And then, you know, this is by accident. I just happened to take a picture of the geladas, and oops, there's this amazing landscape behind. So yeah, amazing. And speaking of landscapes, I haven't had the pleasure of being in the simians in September, as these next pictures show, Gretchen, that you took last year with the mescals in the canyons, and then I'm forgetting the name of that waterfall there.
Oh dear, you're gonna tax my memory far too much. This is well into the park though, and it's a very rewarding, maybe 20-minute walk to get to the waterfall there on the right. And the scene on the left was, I don't know, maybe a 5-minute walk off of the road. So the level of effort to reward in simians is pretty incredible. The other thing I would add is Tad, you haven't been there in September, and the mescals are gorgeous and the green is gorgeous, but the skies tend to be not as clear. So the advantage of the dry season, of course, from a photographic standpoint, is you can get those crystal blue skies along with the dramatic peaks and less of that sort of moisture haze.
Right. Yeah, good point.
Another of the wonderful endemics, if you want to move on, is the Walia ibex. And these extraordinary looking creatures do take a little more effort to see in terms of getting deeper into the park. You're not going to see them when you're out trekking the gelada baboons. But if you plan a little bit of extra time and head deeper into the park, you have a very good chance of seeing them. And we got to spend, geez, I don't know, an hour and a half or so with a group of 3 or 4 of them last autumn, and some of the most surreal vegetation, scenery, kind of, I don't know, lunar landscape with Dr. Seuss plants. It's pretty special to see, and driving through the park, you have many opportunities to get out, stretch your legs, take short hikes, short walks, things like that, and the scenery just, it never stops. So if your guests have the time and the interest, I would highly recommend taking a day to do a deep dive into the park. Another attraction, of course, is bird life. There are a number of endemic bird species, as well as other species that can be found throughout Africa. But, you know, watching lammergeier vultures and tawny eagles and thick-billed ravens cruise over these mountains is incomparable, endemic or no. So birders have some nice opportunities to see some interesting species and like really incredible photographic opportunities. We also mentioned the Ethiopian wolf. Again, almost zero chance to see in Simien Mountains National Park. This photo was actually taken in Bali Mountains National Park, which is a different webinar on a different day, but a highly recommended addition to a trip to Ethiopia if folks have the time and the inclination to get down there. I have been successful in seeing wolves the 2 times I've visited, and it's very incredible. So moving on, there are a couple of lodges that we use in the park. One of them is Limalimo, which many of you may have heard of. And guests at the lodge are invited to visit the Limalimo village, which is about a 45-minute walk away from the lodge. They really encourage that community interaction so that guests have the chance to see, you know, daily life in a rural village, such as the traditional Ethiopian coffee ceremony, which guests will have opportunities throughout their trip. But it is absolutely worth doing. You have the chance to experience local cuisine with a local family, beer making, farming, beekeeping, kind of a real behind the scenes of what that rural life is like. And it really ties the community back to the lodge so that they are directly realizing benefits from the lodge itself as well as the guests. But we'll start with the 2 lodges in the park. We'll start with Simien Lodge, which has a great location. Most of the trekking starts kind of across the road, so you don't even have to hop in a car to go trek the gelada baboons if you're staying here. Simple rooms, good food. They do have solar heated showers and solar heated in-floor heating, and I'll just touch on the fact that I go there in September again. It's cold. It's really cold. So if the sun is not shining, it might be a chilly night in the room, but they do put hot water bottles in the bed and make it as cozy as they can. And as you can see in the lower left there, they have what they claim is the highest bar in Africa. I understand there's a competing highest bar in Africa in Lesotho, Eswatini, excuse me. No, Lesotho.
Yes, Lesotho.
Yeah, but this makes for good photo ops. That funny structure in the front there is a giant fireplace, and it's a good place to cozy up right next to the fire to stay warm in the cooler months. Do you have anything to add on Simien, Tad?
No, I haven't had the opportunity to stay there, but from what you said over the years is, you know, especially in those September months, it does, you know, it is up over 10,000 feet. So it does get pretty cold at night, and there's the style of the rooms tend to be pretty chilly. But as you rightly said, the location is ideal because of the fact that a lot of the trekking routes or the hiking trails are just, you know, start from the lodge pretty much. And you saw, I'll go back here quickly. You saw from this photo in the upper left that the geladas actually, you know, come right into the grounds of the lodge on a fairly regular basis. So the trekking I did was actually from Simien. We didn't stay the night, but I think we were literally, across the street as we started our hike.
Yeah, and really when you're staying at Limalimo, it would be my preferred choice, but availability can really be an issue. you do drive back over to Simien Lodge or near Simien Lodge to go ahead and start the trekking. So that's just something to note. I've also had geladas below my room here at Limalimo. So, you know, everything really is kind of in the park or perched right on the edge. Limalimo is a much newer lodge. It is stunning. The views are stunning. The design is stunning. The food is stunning. Best, strangely, avocado toast I've ever had. But it's run by a couple that are very welcoming, and everything kind of works. I think that getting reservations can be a real challenge, so that's something to know. Date flexibility might be something to consider here if it really is a must-see. But the views are lovely. The rooms are very comfortable. The cuisine is great. The lodge itself is great up top with great communal areas to cozy up by the fire or read a book. There's a nice bar, a dining room. It's just, it's a wonderful, wonderful setup.
And they're affiliated and I think partially funded as well by the AWF. So
yeah.
that whole connection with the Limalimo village is plays a big part because of their AWF connection in, you know, community-based tourism and wanting to support and empower local communities as one of AWF's missions. And then, of course, to also protect and preserve the landscapes and the wild places that they are inhabiting.
The one other thing I would add, just if you have a client that is anyway mobility challenged or perhaps not fit, the lower left photo there doesn't really do it justice, but some of the rooms are a fair walk away. And again, you're somewhere around 9,000 to 10,000 feet at this lodge. So requesting a room for clients that need to be closer to the main lodge is definitely something to consider because it can be steep and trying, and at night it's a bit dark, you need a flashlight, that sort of thing. So something to keep in mind. Moving on, the one other major attraction in the Simiens, of course, is trekking. Now this is for your very keen hikers. This is kind of multi-day trekking with overnight camping. Travel Ethiopia do have their own kit and offer fully hosted mobile camping through the park. I would never advise someone do any self-camping. I think it would be incredibly challenging, and the facilities are not up to par. These are photos of Travel Ethiopia's old kit. They do have all new kit from Tentco in South Africa that they recently purchased. And they also have, you know, a fantastic chef that comes along. So at the end of a long day of stunning, incredible, beautiful hiking, you get well nourished. You get to have that community time, and then you get to curl up in a wonderful bed at high altitude and listen to the mountain sounds at night. It's pretty incredible. So I think that's about it. If we want to open for Q&A.
Yeah, perfect. And I just wanted to add, in terms of, and this is maybe a question that I'll pose and we can answer, you know, people do often ask us, you know, how many nights would you stay in the Simiens, and is it appropriate for people that aren't big trekkers? And I'll answer my own question and then let you and Ashu chime in with your thoughts. But I think a minimum really is 2 nights because that first day you'll get up there in the afternoon and maybe do an introductory trek and to go see geladas, and then the second day gives you a full day. Doing just 1 night is a fam trip, let's be honest. And you definitely want to have more than just 1 night. 3 nights allows you to then have 2 full days. So if you have people that are more keen trekkers, then I would definitely suggest at least having 2 nights for longer days of trekking. As far as, do you have to be a hardcore trekker to go? Absolutely not. You know, if you want to go deeper into the park, as Gretchen was describing, if you want to do camping and multi-day treks, well then, you know, you're probably looking at 10 plus miles a day for doing that. So for those type of trips, yeah, you do want to have somebody that is really keen on trekking. But if you have people that just like to hike, or even if they're not hikers, you can do a hike to see the geladas fairly easily without a lot of ups and downs and elevation gains. So like Gretchen said, across the street from the Simiens, there's a trail, and that's actually where I've seen geladas before as well. So it is definitely a case of, you know, you can do the Simiens if you're not a hardcore trekker. I would still say spend 2 nights so that you have that full day to just enjoy the beautiful scenery. There are drives you can do as well to viewpoints and short hikes. So it's not like you have to be hiking the entire time by any means. So anything.
And Tad,
yeah, go ahead.
I would just add, you know, on the FAMs I've hosted, I've had people from age, you know, 20 something to 70 something, with the 70 something having mobility issues and still being able to go see the geladas and have an incredible experience. You know, we can accommodate for where people are.
Absolutely. So Priscilla has some good questions. If you do have people that are serious about hiking, can you share thoughts on the difference between day hikes and multi-day hikes? So, and then also speak to the various seasons. So maybe just speak to the seasons first, and then talk about what the advantage of doing a multi-day hike, what that gets you. And I think to speak to that, Priscilla, I'm going to go back to the slide that shows the trails. But Gretchen, can you just speak to the seasons?
Sure. You know, I think dry season might be more ideal in terms of having the hike be less challenging. I, you know, did a full day trek back in September, and it was drizzling and slippery, and you know, the clouds came down a couple of times so you couldn't see. Then they would lift and you would get glorious views, and the rain would stop, and then the rain would start again. So I think dry season in terms of just comfort and views probably wins the day. That said, moody, cool rain hiking also has its place. It kind of depends on your person, but
dry season would be mid to end of October, early November through March in the Simiens. Would that be correct? And then, I mean, you probably aren't going to go to the Simiens right now in our summer because of the heavier rains. September, I believe most of the lodges are closed anyway until early to mid-September. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, dry season would be that November through March time period, maybe pushing it into April. And then most of from April or May through August is the rains where it's not the ideal time. September is kind of that shoulder at the end of the rains. Do you have anything else to add on that, Ashu, if you can hear us on your side in terms of the seasonality?
Yeah, I do hear you. Yeah, I mean, the best time for trekkers is like from, as you said, from October, especially like from mid-October all the way to February. March, though it's really very unpredictable, there is rain in March in Simien, March and April. So better like from October to February. And the other thing is like for individuals, by the way, like for 1 to 2 people, really, they have to think also about, the logistics. I mean, sometimes there may be several, camp attendants, like, you may have got a scout, mandatory. You have the local guide, you may have the national guide. There may be, someone who help with carrying the logistics, mule traces, camping gears, and like that. So sometimes really, people have to keep also in mind this stuff when they are planning for trekking. You hear me? Or?
Yes, Ashu, thanks. I think the other thing I would add, Priscilla, is when you're out trekking to see the geladas, this might be like a half-day activity. Whereas, the multi-day hikes, it's morning to night kind of thing. There's plenty of rest, plenty of viewpoints, coffee breaks and things like that, but it's a much more intensive experience.
And when you're doing day hikes by vehicle, say here's the Simien Lodge here, where a lot of the trekking really starts. This is the first kind of camp. This is the public campsite here, and the first one in the park. The bark is just over here, and as Gretchen said, Limalimo is you kind of have to go back through the park entrance to then to get into most of the trekking routes. But from Simien, you can drive quite a ways into the park and then do day hikes, or you could stay a couple of nights at Simien Lodge or Limalimo Lodge at the beginning, and then head out and do some of these longer treks, like for example from Santa Bakir to Gich, or if you are looking to hike Ras Dashen, you're going to have to camp, I believe, at Chenek or even farther into the park for that night to attempt the summit. So it's just a question of getting farther into the park. There are also benefits of seeing some wildlife. For example, the ibex, you won't see around the Simiens, I don't believe. You have to get a little bit farther into the park to see them. Is that correct?
Yeah, we were past Chenek when we saw them in the autumn last year. And I would say, just for perspective, because this map doesn't really give you an idea of the scope, from Limalimo to, let's call it half an hour past Chenek and back was a full day.
And you were a full day of driving.
Yeah, I mean,
trekking.
we stopped for waterfall walks. We had a picnic at a scenic viewpoint, that sort of thing. But that was a full day.
Yeah. And Priscilla, we can give you
absolutely. You know, if you need for the Walia ibex, you have to really go to the Chenek area. From Chenek to White Pass, which is really over 3,000. Chenek is 3,600 meters, so it's above that you can find the ibex.
And
Priscilla, but you can drive all the way to here. The good thing.
Right.
Yeah.
We can send you some specific distances for multi-day hikes between these different campsites. And as Ashu alluded to earlier, you do have to stay in the public campgrounds when you are doing camping. We, however, have our own site away from where the other campers are, and we generally stay away from the public toilets in particular, and have our own private ablutions. So, but you are restricted to the public campsites, which means that you're be doing trekking between those points, which again we can send you some more information on how that works. Any other questions? I don't see any others. Emily, I'll send you a ballpark cost for multi-day trekking. It really just depends on how far into the park you're going, how big your group is, but we can get you rough estimates, which I'll send to you via email. Yeah, I don't see any other questions. Anything else, Gretchen or Ashu, that you wanted to add before we close up this deep dive and move on to the next week?
Really not a lot, but just one point. Just my personal advice is, like, if really no clients want just to have got only a night, it may be better for them to stay in the Simien Lodge, so that they can maximize what they're going to see with the national park. If it is Limalimo, they have to drive back and get out of the national park before 6.
It's a great
point. Yeah, that is a very good point in terms of the logistics. Is that advantage of having Simien inside the park and not having to go back out. And again, I would recommend people do spend more than one night, just because of the reasons I outlined earlier. But a great point nonetheless, Ashu, and something to consider. And further properties, we're hoping that there will be others that will be opened in the next several years. Up to the March, there were several that were in the works, but then of course everything has kind of been put on pause because of our current status in the world. But it is a bit of as Gretchen also said, a challenge because of availability at Limalimo. It is by far the most in demand property, and it really is the only boutique lodge in this area. As such, most of the North American tour operators and agents we work with prefer that property to Simien Lodge. But it does present the challenge of availability. So we're hoping to have a couple other options in the near future, but at this point, Simien and Limalimo are really the only two up to standard inside the park, or even in the debark area at this point. So next week, same time, we will be presenting on on Lalibela, which is, of course, one of the most sought after and popular tourist sites, but also has an incredible historic and religious significance in Ethiopia. So stay tuned for that for next week, and we look forward to seeing you then. Have a great rest of this week. Ashu, thanks so much for joining us from your side, especially given some of the connection challenges. And we look forward to seeing you next week. And Gretchen, have a great rest of your day in the Rocky Mountains. And everyone else, thanks again for being here today. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chad.